Gaurav Sawant, the managing editor, is also with us on this broadcast. Gaurav, good evening. To take forward a conversation with Abhishek and Shiv, I was talking about how the Chief of Defence Staff is someone who is recognized, who is defined as someone who is on active duty. And here you have Lieutenant General Mr. Anil Chauhan, who retired last year in May 2021, being chosen.
So, General Chauhan was working on maritime security coordination, was a part of the National Security Council Secretariat, was working very closely with National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. As far as the Secretary, Department of Military Affairs is concerned, or the Chief of Defence Staff, the task is implementation of what the government also expects of the armed forces, what it expects, when it comes to the road ahead for the armed forces. So he is one of the secretaries in the Ministry of Defence, and multiple hats that General Chauhan will be wearing. His rich experience in the past 4 decades likely to come in extremely handy, considering he was Eastern Army Commander, and that's again something which is extremely critical as far as the current situation is concerned, given India's reorganization towards the north, looking very closely at what's happening across the line of actual control. So this is where his hands-on knowledge on ground comes in very, very handy as far as the government is concerned. The bigger task, as both Shiv and Abhishek were also discussing with you, would be the reforms that is being talked about, the integration, the theaterization. The theaterization remains the biggest challenge as far as the Ministry of Defence, the armed forces are concerned. And this is where his acumen and his stewardship would be very critical, whether he's able to take the 3 services along, even as he instructs and gets along with the task of ensuring theaterization happens as quickly and as effortlessly as possible in the months and years ahead.
That's right, Gaurav. We were also discussing exactly that, the kind of challenges that he now faces as the Chief of Defence Staff. He's succeeding someone like General Bipin Rawat, who is very vociferous, very aggressive in his approach. Going by how Lieutenant General Anil Chauhan has served previously in the army, can you give us a few, instances, something about his career that will give us a glimpse of what exactly his trajectory, what his decisions could look like as CDS?
So his being Eastern Army Commander comes in extremely critical to his appointment. His working very closely with the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval in the National Security Council. That becomes extremely critical. These are things, in fact, as Abhishek and Shiv were also discussing a little while earlier, the buzz was there for quite some time. There were 2 names, we were told, or 3 that had been shortlisted. The former Army Commander, Northern Command's name, the Chief of Naval Staff, his name, and of course General Chauhan's name. These were some names that were doing the rounds, and many argued that perhaps this time there would be an officer from the Navy, but there must be several factors that worked in favor of General Chauhan, perhaps seniority being one of them, his experience in the Eastern Command, his working closely in the National Security Council Secretariat being another, some of the issues that may have worked in his favor. But the selection is only one part of the story, and considering the government waited a long time before coming with this decision, now the challenges actually start, because some had started arguing that we actually need a Chief of Defence Staff if we were doing for so long without one, and the fact that nobody from the serving lot was found perhaps suitable by the government, or did they have some other considerations in mind, a deeper selection or a selection where they actually tweaked norms to bring in retired officers for this, and brought in General Chauhan to be the Chief of Defence Staff. So his challenges remain. Our adversary on the north, China, remains a huge challenge, as does theaterization, and the Indo-Pacific, which again is huge. Atmanirbhar Bharat is something where the government is wanting to go full stream ahead. The Agniveer scheme and effective implementation of Agniveer. Again, these are several aspects that he would have to work 24/7 and hit the ground running.
Gaurav, it's taken essentially 294 days for the second CDS, for the second Chief of Defence Staff to be announced. And there will be questions about why it's taken this long. Why did it take the Modi government this much time to finally zero in on Lieutenant General Anil Chauhan?
Perhaps a general who's completely in sync with the thinking of the government, somebody who's able to implement what the government is looking at in terms of whatever has been achieved in the first 5 years of this government, or the first 8 years of this government, and in the remaining tenure of this government, there are certain policies that the government wants implemented, and they need somebody who will be perfectly in sync to be able to deliver, because this is what the government is looking at. Agniveer is something that was argued very effectively, both sides, some in favor and many against, saying whether this will be effective or not, and would it lead to, maybe short-term gains but not long-term gains. Now, here is someone who will have to ensure effective implementation of Agniveer scheme. That's point one. Point two, equally important, is Atmanirbhar Bharat. For decades, there's been a lot of reluctance to ensure that made in India products are accepted by the armed forces, in terms of where pressure also needs to be put on the original equipment manufacturer to deliver quality. It's not just one thing putting pressure on the armed forces to buy what is made in India. Equal amount of pressure needs to be put on the manufacturers to ensure that quality assurance is 100%. You cannot make a pilots, for example, buy an aircraft where quality assurance is not guaranteed, or where the best equipment is not given. And this is where there have been arguments between the service headquarters and either those who are manufacturing or those who are servicing. And this is where you require someone who's able to put equal pressure on both sides. Put pressure on the armed forces to buy, put pressure on the manufacturers to give quality 24/7, because human lives are at stake, and national security is at stake. So all of these are aspects that the government wanted to be very clear on before moving forward, and perhaps that's the reason they took close to 300 days, 294 days, as you very rightly pointed out, before appointing the next Chief of Defence Staff.